Hello everybody, welcome to my channel, welcome to the video. I thought today we'll talk about a topic that I don't usually talk about, and partly it's because I haven't engaged in this kind of activity that much in my life, in all honesty. But I thought I may have made a video about it before on my channel, but I can't remember off the top of my head. But it was many, I think it was quite a long time ago now. So sometimes it's good to revisit things, because sometimes you end up with a better perspective on it, a deeper understanding of things as time goes on. You get more distance with certain periods of time and memories. So if I have touched upon this before on my channel, then I do apologise. But I just go with whatever is on my mind any particular day as far as making videos. I don't really I very rarely have a well thought out plan as to. I don't even plan on making videos at all, really. It's just that sometimes I just kind of feel in the mood to do it, and I just think, well, what can I talk about today? Although there are some days where I have something in mind. As I've said many times on my channel, I don't follow I don't follow any kind of script, or I don't really plan out my videos. I have an idea of what I want to talk about. Depending on what the topic is, might have a bit of a direction. But anyway, I'm waffling on here. So yeah, I want to talk about substances today. I'm talking about drugs. Thankfully it hasn't been something that's ruined my life, or something that I've relied upon excessively over the years. But I'd be lying if I said I hadn't turned to drugs at times in my life, for various reasons, and I'll get onto that in a minute. Before I go any further, I just want to say that I've been having problems with my iPad, and I don't know exactly how long this video is going to be, but it could be that it shuts off at some point. So with that in mind, I'm probably going to try and keep it brief, maybe within sort of 20 minutes or something. And I think that's probably what I'm going to try and do from now on. I'm not going to make maybe it's a good thing that's happened, perhaps. Maybe it's better to make shorter videos, because it's better for, rather than, I don't think people have got time to listen to nobody on YouTube waffling on for an hour or so. So anyway, yeah, so I think that might be something that I'll try to do from now on. And I'm sorry about this razor burn that I've got going on here. I just had a shave about 2 hours ago. And I always have problems with my skin here. I have a bit of sensitive skin under my chin area. So, and I seem to be getting quite chubby in the face, and I have a shit haircut. Anyway, so yeah, drugs. I suppose I started taking. Well, when I said taking, I started using drugs probably for the first time, I would imagine, when I was maybe 13, 14, whereby I used to occasionally smoke at school with people like Colin and Joe Dinsdale, God rest his soul. I think Scott as well, and other people. I think Danny is later on, and maybe Paddy or whoever, and maybe even my old friend David at some point. I can't recall off the top of my head now, but I know I did certainly smoke tobacco when I was in like year 8 or 9. I think probably starting from then. I think, but it wasn't like a regular occurrence thing. It really was just every now and again. I wasn't really that really wasn't my thing. I never really got into smoking, not properly, Um, yeah, I could have a cig with somebody. I could have a smoke, but it was never really something that I gravitated towards for the most part. And if it was just, I don't know, it just wasn't very appealing to me really. But that really was, I suppose, the very first time that I'd ever did anything in that regard. You know, I'm not, you know, I don't have some tales of, you know, addiction or anything along those lines, because I've never have had issues with those things, thankfully. Yet anyway, hopefully I don't for the rest of my life, but I hope not. But I have to some extent abused drugs, I suppose, at times in a way. Um, so from school, really, tobacco. I think I was introduced to that, and then later on, I was introduced to um, marijuana, or green, or whatever you want to call it, ganj, pot, herb, etc., etc. Hence the, I thought this shit would be appropriate. But having said that, I never actually smoked it at school, as far as I can remember, anyway. At secondary school, that wasn't really until I was in my very early 20s when I started to smoke marijuana. Um, I'll come on to that in a sec. So that was basically that. My introduction to drugs was kind of sort of just partly it was just sort of being around people. I mean, my brother used to smoke as well, my older brother. And alcohol was a common occurrence in my household growing up. So, by that I mean my parents went through a period where they were heavily on the bottle, on the booze. They won't admit that, but so it's not like I wasn't far away from the impacts of drugs, and you used to see people around on the estate and around town, clearly on, you know, I don't know what, but probably all sorts of class A drugs. Um, and of course, in over the years, I'd heard of things like acid and LSD and magic mushrooms and psilocybin, and and later on, I got introduced. Became aware of DMT. So yeah, it wasn't like I didn't grow up. I wasn't like isolated from the real world in a way. I wasn't like completely. Of course, I was. I was kind of persuaded not to take drugs and things like that from being when I was at primary school. I remember there was these campaigns of don't take certain things from certain people, and there was a talk of child molesters and all that kind of stuff when I was at primary school, and being aware of don't get into strangers' cars and all that kind of thing. So it's not like I didn't grow. Um, it's not like I didn't grow up with no awareness of what drugs were, but it wasn't. I don't really think it was until I got into my 20s really that well, maybe later on, in my very late teens, early 20s, mid 20s, when I really started to see just how damaging drugs can be, and I kind of went through a bad period myself with marijuana, and I hope this video doesn't cut off, because that would be really annoying. But I hope I, I'd like to make this video about 20 to 30 minutes if I can. I mean, like, I don't have a lengthy history with drugs or anything, but there are some things I'd like to get into a little bit in depth. So if I can, I'll do it. So really, apart from the odd cigarette here and there, and I used to, and I think I started probably had my first alcoholic drink. I'd say maybe when I was like maybe 14, maybe 15. I can't really remember, but it was around It was somewhere around about maybe year 9, year 10, I think, something like that. And I never drank at home. Like I would, that's one thing I can say about my parents, is that they never, they weren't in any way trying to like force me to drink alcohol. In fact, if anything, they didn't want me to drink it because they knew what I saw when they had too much to drink, and that was a regular occurrence in the late 90s, early to mid 2000s. Let me tell you, yeah, bad times in certain ways. So alcohol was never far away. It was, and I had times where not. I've never had problems with alcohol in the sense of um, addiction, but I have turned to alcohol at times when I felt really low, and I was having a really rough day, and I've had in the last year or two, I've had the odd day here and there where I have got myself a little bit silly drunk. I think said some things and done some things I regret now, but who hasn't? Who hasn't done that with alcohol? So it's not anything remarkable. So really, the only real thing I can say, um, in terms of harder drugs. I mean, alcohol is definitely a hard drug if you abuse it. But I mean, in terms of stronger drugs and good and bad experiences, there's two things that I've done in my life so far, and that's smoke marijuana, and also I took a few tabs of LSD when I was in my early 20s. And that's it, really. That's just not my. I don't have a particularly special or massively interesting story, um, but as far as marijuana is concerned, I got introduced to that by a Romanian guy actually, through an old clubbing friend at the time that I was starting to go out clubbing in my early 20s. And I just remember him because I like mentioning it a few times, and I think Adam was kind of like trying to persuade me to not to take it, kind of thing, and not to get involved with this guy. I got the impression maybe that this old guy that used to go clubbing was maybe just trying to like push me on to this guy so he didn't have to deal with him, kind of thing, because it was a bit of a nutjob, a bit of a conspiracy theorist, wacky type. But it was intelligent. The guy was knowledgeable, and it was friendly enough, I guess. But it was definitely been taking too many drugs. Definitely got some very skewed, um, irrational beliefs and outlooks on life, and religiously dogmatic. But what I will say is that thanks to him, I had some really great times. We had some very interesting talks, and I had some great experiences under the influence of marijuana. And the thing that I loved about marijuana is how quickly you got to that high, and how it sort of reshapes the way you think and feel about a lot of things. How you can look at a picture that you've seen 1,000 times over and see something new in it. Look at it in a different way. It becomes something else. And I can understand why he has a I don't know if he still is, but a graphic designer, went down that route, because it's not a. It can certainly be addictive, and it can certainly be problematic, but compared to, I don't know, like amphetamines and crack and cocaine and things like that, crystal meth, etc. It's like it's really heroin. It's not. You can kind of still more or less live a kind of normal life, really, until that you end up getting to a point where your body can no longer. You basically reached a kind of point where your body says it needs more and more and more of it to get to the same high that you used to get with less of it. Your body's kind of built up resistance to it, and kind of has tolerated a certain amount of it, so it doesn't. So eventually, you end up having to take more and more and more of it, and it kind of, if you're not careful, kind of does become a kind of addiction in a way, but not. It, I think for the most part, most people don't have an addiction as such, but it can become it becomes a point where you know that tolerance issue starts creeping in, and you end up having to take more of it to get the same high or to get a better high than you used to get. So that's the problem with marijuana. It's a fantastic drug. Don't get me wrong. Cannabis is a great creative, artistic, philosophical um, kind of influencer. You know, it's a very good drug for, I think, for introverts and for people who want to kind of be alone with their own thoughts and with their own inner sort of world, and to kind of delve into that a little bit more, or just to have a great time, just even just for kind of recreational fun. Really, it's not, it's not a massively serious drug, and it wears off after a few hours anyway. It's like it doesn't. So that's the thing I personally liked about marijuana, is that it doesn't last too long. You you come up very quickly, and for the most part there aren't too many issues when you're coming down, and apart from maybe a little bit of short-term memory loss. And of course things like music, of course, they take on a whole different dimension when you're under the influence of cannabinoids, and how THC receptors and things like that, the brain chemistry, how all that's affected, and how that impacts your perceptions of things, your perception of sound, your perception of colours and things like this, and also how you feel about things as well. That's one of the things I miss about cannabis, is that I would definitely do cannabis again. Not here, of course, because it's illegal. As far as I know, it is anywhere, I think. I could be wrong on that, I'm not sure, but yeah, I would certainly do cannabis again, under the right circumstances, and I think that was the key for me. I wouldn't have done it. I wouldn't do it again with other people, to be honest. I would do it on my own, because I found that it kind of was. I wasn't very comfortable being around other people. I kind of, apart from the only good aspect about marijuana in terms of socializing is that it can be a great kind of a bit of a bonding thing in terms of like humor and to some extent, but of course that memory loss and that paranoia when those kind of things like that start creeping in, which doesn't usually take long, that can kind of ruin the experience. For me it did anyway, a lot of the time. Not completely, but it was, I kind of just preferred being on my own, really. And I certainly like riding around on my bike when I was high and things like that. It was, and getting the munchies. I loved all that kind of stuff. That was, for me. I would, if I was to say, if I was to recommend any drug, it would be marijuana, cannabis, because I think it's the least problematic overall. But again, everything has to be in moderation. You need to have the right setting. If you're going to be around people, be around the right people, and you need to be in the right frame of mind before you do it as well. Like a lot of drugs, certainly psychedelics. So I started smoking marijuana from about, as far as I can remember, I think from 22 to about 24, I think, from what I can remember. I think I was, maybe 22. I think I met the guy, in 2012, so I was probably about 21, 22 or something. And I stopped doing it with him when I was 24. But then I did some marijuana later on in Southeast Asia as well, not here in Thailand, but in what was it? I did some in Cambodia, where, as far as I know, I think it's pretty much legal there. I don't think I did any in Laos, but certainly in Cambodia I did, and it's very strong there, actually, very strong. But it's a wicked drug. It really is. There's no denying that. it is a great substance if used correctly. If not, if you don't abuse it, and you don't become too reliant upon it for, to get you through your life, basically, to deal with reality. It's like anything, it's like anything that you rely too much on becomes a serious, not to the point necessarily of addiction, but when you kind of you get to a point where it kind of starts, you're not far off it becoming an addiction, essentially. You get to a point where it becomes more of a regular occurrence. Not You're not addicted to it, but you start relying on it a bit more than you should be, let's say. But it's not. I never got to a point where I was like smoking it every day or anything. For the most part, I think it was like once or twice. I think from time to time it might be in once or twice a week, but then later on it was like every maybe like 2 or 3 weeks, something like that. And later on, I actually decided to quit smoking it because it was causing me problems. I started having problems with my memory. I was getting a bit paranoid about things, and I got to a stage where I was just like, you've got to be careful with anything, any substances that you use. Even caffeine. Even of course, prescription drugs and certainly alcohol. So it's like anything. You just have to know when to. You've got to have self-control, and that's the problem with drugs over time. Is you can start to lose that if you're not careful, because you get addicted to that, or not addicted, but that high becomes kind of more enjoyable than real life. So you start, you kind of start believing that's what life is, and that's how you should be feeling all the time, kind of thing. And so if you're not careful, and some people do get addicted to marijuana. Some people, and I actually think Paul, the guy that I used to hang out with for a period of time, I think he was addicted to it for quite a few years by all accounts. And I remember and another reason why I kind of there was a lot of reasons why I wanted to kind of stop hanging around with the guy. I mean, partly it's because he had a child and he started acting up, started being weird at a certain point. Weird. He started acting up really towards the end of, if you can call it a friendship. It was a bit of an odd kind of a friendship, to be honest. It wasn't really a friendship. It was more of a kind of a smoking pal type thing. It was like with this other guy, Adam. He was a clubbing pal. It was just someone I saw every now and again. I mentioned him on the channel before, and Paul was. He wasn't someone that I saw regularly, but I kind of had a bit more respect for him, if I'm being honest, than I did for Adam in certain ways. But in other ways, I had a bit more. I'd respect in other ways for Adam because he kind of had his shit together a bit more. But it was a bit shallow and a bit kind of bland and a bit two-faced, and I don't know. It was nice enough, but it was quite fake individual, really. I think looking back on it now, and I certainly wouldn't have done. I wouldn't do now what I did back then, I don't think. But we're all young once. So yeah, I carried on smoking with him, and I remember being in the car with him. I remember once he was quite high, like it clearly had more than he should have had. And I remember he was speeding down the dual carriageway, and we almost hit a van, I think. And I just got to a point. I just seemed like he was out of control. I think at a certain point, I think his life was out of control. Or he felt like it was. He wasn't happy being in the UK. His partnership was his girlfriend and him was having problems, and he was obviously not ready to be a father. I don't think. I think there was a lot of things going wrong in his life, and upon reflection, there were reasons why I did it as well. And I think that's the case with most people who turn to drugs. Yeah, part of it is curiosity, because you've heard things about it before, and there's certain connotations attached to certain things, you've heard your friends talk about at school, you've seen things on the TV or online or whatever it might be, and some part of you's just curious as a human being. You just want to try it and see what it's like, and I'd say for the most part, I enjoyed the vast majority of the time that I smoked marijuana. Then that's not me saying this is by no means me promoting drug use, because I don't promote it. But I would say that if anyone's out there that's gonna that wants that is curious about drugs, then I would say out of everything, that's the best place to start and to end your curiosity about what are essentially illegal substances for the most part, and substances that can be very damaging um, to your psychology. It can damage you over time if you're not careful, and it can make you antisocial. It can make you exceptionally paranoid and suspicious and very cynical about a lot of things if you're not careful as well. So you've got to be very careful. I think you've got to be careful why you're doing it. I think for me, I was in a good place because I wasn't depressed in my life at that point, but I certainly, I wasn't deeply in a state of depression during the time that I was smoking marijuana, but I certainly wasn't happy in my life in certain ways, and I think that's partly why I did it, or why I kept on doing it. But it was also because it was it was entertaining, it was funny, we had some really good laughs about things, and we had some really good talks, and but I always got the impression with him that he felt like he was on a mission kind of thing, like he was some kind of missionary type individual, that he was spreading the word of God, spreading the word of marijuana kind of thing. And it was just it kind of got to me eventually. I was just kind of like a bit sick and tired of this very sort of pushy, dominant behavior from him. It was evident that he'd been smoking this stuff for quite a while, and I think although I don't think he quite realised it. It was having negative impacts on him. I mean, don't get me wrong. He could function. Clearly he had a decent job. He had a car. He had a house, and so it's not. I'm not saying he was dysfunctional per se, but it was obvious that I don't think he was quite all there. If I'm being honest, I think he had a few screws loose. In terms of the way that he viewed the world, and he was quite egotistical, quite an arrogant individual, very like I said, pushy. I mean, it's not like it's not like he was saying, "Yo, you're wrong. Your opinion." We used to have talks about like religion and things like that, and he was always. I remember him always being paranoid about the number two, and like I remember him telling me about like times on the clock and things like that. Whenever he'd look at the clock, it'd be certain times or certain, and I was just kind of like, "This fucking guy's mental." But this is the thing you got to be so careful with drugs. It can turn you like that. It can make you exceptionally paranoid and suspicious. So you do have to be very, very careful. And then when I was 23, when I came back from my holiday in Australia, I was for a while. I was in a lonely place for a while when I came back, and I was like, oh god, back to this shit again. When I got back home, and it was just like the high of that 3 months away in Australia, and the realization of being back in England and living with someone I didn't really want to live with at the time, and for a lot of reasons, and not being able to live with my parents for a lot of reasonable reasons. There were a lot of reasons why I didn't want to go back to living with them, and I certainly wasn't happy in the situations that I was living with the guy that I was living with at the time, because the reason that I'm living with him was because I had previously I'd had some serious issues at home that I won't go into, but so ultimately there were reasons why I did decide to take drugs. Part of it, like I said before, it was this burning curiosity. I wonder what it's like, what it feels like You know, you want this thing of being young and, you know, in being feeling invincible. Um, you know, could it help me in some way? Like, would it be good for me? Maybe, you know, maybe I should just give it a shot, just give it a try, just once, and see what happens. And I did enjoy it. I did enjoy a lot of those times, and I had some very good memories, and I'm not ashamed to say that. But you know, it did cause me to be suspicious and paranoid at times, and I felt honestly there were times, and I think I posted about this, or either posted about it, or I sent messages to people at the time, 2013 or something like that, 2014, when I was kind of felt like I was kind of losing grip a little bit with reality, and kind of felt like I was going a bit mental, to be honest. And that's because I was doing it. I was It was becoming a habit. It was becoming a more regular than it should be. Not an addiction, but I was kind of pushing my boundaries, kind of thing. I think pushing my limitations. You know, I wasn't a stoner as such. It's something that I used to do every now and again, but there was a time where it was, well, I think probably smoking too much than I should have done, and you got to be very careful about that sort of stuff. So you know, there was a point where I was kind of like, I really wanted to kind of distance myself from that. But yeah, when I got back from Australia, I remember Paul talking to me about LSD. I think it might have been before I went, and or maybe it was just after I came back. I can't remember now. And he had a friend called Kev, and he just sort of, I just remember him sort of talking about it, and I said, oh, you know, I'll give it a shot, see what it's like, see what it's all about, what the hype is about, kind of thing. Because everyone's heard of LSD, you know. It's. I remember people talking about it at school, and you know, you've all seen the pictures of like the cartoons on the tabs and all that kind of stuff, and you know, it's stuff you've seen in maybe sort of effects of it. You've seen cartoons and in films and so forth. So again, I was curious. I wanted to just try it. I was certainly never planning on carrying on with LSD the way I carried on with smoking marijuana. Um, but I didn't know that at the time. I didn't really. I was like, it wasn't something like I had this plan or anything. But I was like, I probably should be a bit more careful here, because this stuff's it's a lot stronger, and it lasts a lot longer. So, and I was aware of that at the time, but I was aware of also being in the right, you know, as positive as I could possibly be. I think we did it. I came back. I came back from Australia in. I'm trying to remember now. I think it was May, and I think we did it in. I don't know if it was the height of the summer. Can't quite remember. I think it might have been, or early. I can't really remember now, but I think it was summer when we did it. Maybe midsummer. Um, I remember we did. You know, I remember we was talking about it in the afternoon, and we just kind of went to the park, and I think I took 2 or 3 tabs. I think, and I remember the first thing I remember was the trees, sort of moving, and it was a sort of wavy kind of motion, just wavy feeling, and colours, seeing the colours of the leaves changing, and it was a sense of peace at first. I'll be honest. It was really tranquil. It was really beautiful, actually, and it was really, well. It was the first time I'd ever taken LSD, so I wasn't exactly sure what to expect, because you know, we'll if it depends on how strong it is, and everyone's sort of got a bit of a different tolerance, I guess, and so I kind of knew what to expect to a certain degree, because obviously Paul had told me. But it, it it was, we spent some time in the park, and I just remember them. I remember being really paranoid about Paul and Kev. I don't know why they were just. There seemed there was acting up. There was acting a bit strange, and that's probably partly because I was under the influence of LSD. But um, I don't know. I was just really. I was getting a bit paranoid. I think, getting a bit suspicious. But I think there was like, oh, they was planning on leaving me there on my own kind of thing, and I was just like, I just, I just kind of got some bad vibes from them both. Like even before that time, and after that night, I think I saw that this guy a handful of times, to be honest. I didn't really see him much after that, and I didn't really, never really got on with the guy anyway. It was I don't, it's not, I didn't dislike the guy as such, but it wasn't like, he wasn't a friend. It was just an acquaintance. It was just somebody that I knew because I'd met through this guy that was, you know, I sort of considered Paul to be a friend to a certain point, but it was really just kind of, it was a stone and pal kind of thing. It's like, I don't mean that in a bad way, but that's kind of what that became. It was like, it was someone to hang out with. But it wasn't. We didn't always smoke together. I mean, it wasn't all the time, but most of the time we used to have a smoke until towards the end, when his child was almost born, and then we hardly did at that point. And I think the last time I spoke to Paul in England itself was just before I left to come to Asia, and that was in, I think, March 2015. And I talked to him a handful of times over the years, but I haven't spoken to him in years, and I'd have no interest in doing so now. He's moved on, and his past leaves a lot to be desired. Let's put it that way. Yeah, it was a bit of a narcissist, I think, to be honest. And I think his pal Kev, I think he was kind of under his spell a little bit, partly because he could get access to drugs. But so LSD was kind of a life-changing experience. It was great being in the park for those first few hours. But later on, we went back to that guy Kev's house, and I remember looking at the cup and the design on the cup changing, the colour changes. I remember being on the trampoline and watching the tree and sort of laughing about how the tree looked like a cat with like a boxing glove on, and silly things like this, and sort of just thinking that this guy looked like an alien. Remember, like the weird, like this eerie kind of like sound of the washing machine. I was getting a bit paranoid. I was kind of coming up, like really up, and it was getting to a point where it was getting really strong, and of course I didn't realize how strong it was going to be, so I had no idea. So I was in it front. It was a bit of a shock, and when I watched when we went outside and saw the car go by at a snail's pace, it was like, whoa, this is mental. This is crazy shit. So that was a very interesting experience, and I enjoyed that for the most part. But it was very, very trippy, and as you would expect of LSD. But yeah, it was weird. It was really weird. Would I do it again? I'm not so sure. I don't think so. Probably not. Not. I don't know. Maybe, possibly. I don't. It wouldn't be my first choice. I think if I was going to do drugs again, not that I ever did drugs properly, but if I was going to, I'd do marijuana again in a heartbeat. To be honest, it's a fantastic drug, as long as you don't abuse it. So, yeah, marijuana, LSD. Those are the two main things that I did in my life. Of course, I've hit the bottle a few times on and off, but not to the point of addiction, but certainly to the point where it could have led to addiction. I'll say that. So yeah, I just thought that I'd share that with you. There were reasons why I've done the things I've done. Thankfully, it's never been to the point where it's damaged my life, or I've ended up in doing silly things because of the drugs used. But yeah, I think in hindsight, I maybe shouldn't have done any of it, but I'm kind of glad I did. Really, it changed my life in certain ways, changed my perspective, and it's all about the setting. Really, it's all about the people that you're around or not around. And it's all about you. It's your mindset, how you feel. Make sure you're in the right frame of mind, and make sure you're doing it for the right reasons. Really, that's my advice. Not that you should take drugs, but if you're gonna, that's what I would say. So that's it for today. Before the video cuts off, because my memory's running out on my iPad. So just a quick one today. Really, nothing. I really haven't much else to say about it, but I just thought I'd share that. If I have anything else to add to it at some point, then I'll make another video about it. But that's it for today. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you again soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.